In the dusty plains of Vernon, Texas, on the 23rd of April 1936, Roy Kelton Orbison entered a world still reeling from the Great Depression. His father, Orby Lee, worked in the oil fields, moving the family from town to town across Texas. Young Roy suffered from terrible eyesight from birth, a condition that would later define his iconic image, though in childhood it simply meant a shy, introspective boy who found solace in music. At age 6, Roy received his first guitar for his birthday. His father taught him the basics, and soon the boy with the thick glasses was performing at local gatherings. When polio struck his community, Roy survived unscathed, but the fear and isolation of that epidemic would color his understanding of loneliness, an emotion that would become his artistic signature. The Wink Westerners. By 13, Roy had his first band. In Wink, Texas, a town so small its population barely broke 1,000, he formed the Wink Westerners. They played country music at local dances and on a radio show in Kermit, Texas. Roy's voice, even then, possessed an unusual quality, a soaring tenor that seemed to carry more emotion than a teenage boy should possess. After high school, Roy enrolled at North Texas State College, studying geology while moonlighting as a musician. But music called louder than rocks and minerals. He dropped out, reformed his band as the Teen Kings, and in 1955, caught his first real break. Rockabilly Dreams the Teen Kings recorded Ooby Dooby at Norman Petty's studio in Clovis, New Mexico, the same studio where Buddy Holly would soon make history. The song caught the attention of Sam Phillips at Sun Records in Memphis, the same man who discovered Elvis Presley. In 1956, Roy found himself at the legendary Sun Records, standing where Elvis had stood, trying to capture that same lightning. Ooby Dooby climbed to number 59 on the Billboard chart's modest success, but success nonetheless. Roy Orbison was now a professional recording artist, yet at Sun Records, he remained in the shadow of Elvis, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis. Phillips wanted rockabilly rebels. Roy was something different, a crooner in a rock and roll world. After a year and 4 singles that went nowhere, Sun Records let him go. It seemed like the end. Roy was 22, married to his girlfriend Claudette Frady, and watching his dream evaporate. He moved to Nashville, hoping to reinvent himself as a songwriter. Act 2. The Ascent 1960 to 1966. The Monument Years. In Nashville, Roy wrote songs for others. Claudette became a hit for the Everly Brothers. He was good at writing, but his performer's heart still ached to sing. In 1959, producer Fred Foster heard something special in Roy's voice and signed him to Monument Records. Foster understood what Sam Phillips hadn't. Roy Orbison wasn't a rockabilly singer. He was a dramatic balladeer, an operatic voice wrapped in rock and roll arrangements. They needed the right song. Only the Lonely came to Roy in a moment of inspiration in 1960. Written with Joe Melson, the song told a story of isolation and heartbreak in a way pop music rarely dared. When Roy sang Only the Lonely Know the Way I Feel Tonight, his voice didn't just reach high notes, it seemed to touch something universal and painful. Elvis Presley and the Everly Brothers both passed on recording it. Their loss became Roy's triumph. Released in May 1960, Only the Lonely shot to number 2 on the Billboard charts. Suddenly, Roy Orbison, the failed rockabilly singer, the man too strange for Sun Records, was a star. The Golden Streak. What followed was unprecedented. Running Scared hit number 1 in 1961, building to an operatic crescendo without a traditional chorus. Crying showcased Roy's 3-octave range and became one of the most heartbreaking songs ever recorded. In Dreams in 1963 featured complex structure and haunting imagery. Oh, Pretty Woman in 1964 became his biggest hit, spending 3 weeks at number 1 and selling 7 million copies. Roy's image crystallized. Dark sunglasses initially worn because he forgot his regular glasses before a performance. Black clothing, standing statue still on stage. While other rock stars gyrated and postured, Roy simply stood and sang. His voice did all the performing necessary. By 1963, Roy was touring with the Beatles when they were still the opening act. John Lennon later said, "Watching Roy perform was humbling. Here was a man who needed no gimmicks, just that impossible voice." The Tragedy Begins success, however, brought scrutiny to his personal life. Roy's marriage to Claudette was tumultuous. His song Claudette celebrated her, but the reality was more complicated. They divorced in 1964, remarried months later, and struggled to find stability. On the 6th of June 1966, Roy was on tour in Bristol, England, when he received devastating news. Claudette had been killed in a motorcycle accident in Tennessee. Roy was performing when a journalist broke the news to him on stage. He finished the tour, what else could he do? But something in him shattered. He threw himself into his children, raising 3 sons alone. But his career, which had burned so bright, began to dim. The British invasion had changed music. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, they dominated radio. Roy's dramatic ballads seemed out of step with the times. Act 3. Darkness and Decline. 1967 to 1979 House of Fire. In 1968, Roy remarried, finding love with Barbara Jacobs. For a brief moment, happiness seemed possible again. They bought a house in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Roy was recording less, but focusing on being present for his sons and his new wife. Then, on the 14th of September 1968, while Roy and Barbara were on tour, their Hendersonville home caught fire. Roy's 2 eldest sons, Roy Duane and Anthony King VI, died in the blaze. No parent should bury 1 child, let alone 2. Roy had now lost his first wife and 2 sons in the span of 26 months. Friends wondered how he could continue. Some nights on stage, they could see the grief in every note. The wilderness. Years. The 1,970 seconds were cruel to Roy Orbison. His voice remained magnificent, but the music industry had moved on. Disco, punk, album-oriented rock, none of it had room for a 1,960 seconds balladeer in dark glasses, singing about loneliness. He toured constantly, especially overseas where his old hits still drew crowds. In Britain and Europe, he remained a legend. In America, he was increasingly forgotten. His albums barely charted. New songs failed to connect. He underwent triple bypass surgery in 1978. His body as worn as his spirit. Record executives no longer returned his calls. Radio stations filed him under oldies. He was only in his 40s, but to the music industry he might as well have been ancient history. Roy battled weight gain, health problems, and depression. Yet he never stopped working. Music was all he had left. Some nights, performing crying to half-empty clubs in forgotten towns, the tears weren't just artistic expression. Act 4. The Resurrection. 1980 to 1988. Returning from the shadows. The 1980 seconds began inauspiciously. Roy continued his endless tours, playing county fairs and small venues. But slowly, something shifted. A new generation of musicians, Bruce Springsteen, Tom Waits, Elvis Costello, spoke reverently of Roy Orbison's influence. They weren't being nostalgic, they recognized his artistry. In 1986, director David Lynch used In Dreams hauntingly in his film Blue Velvet, introducing Roy's music to a new audience who had never heard the original recordings. The song's surreal, dreamlike quality perfectly matched Lynch's vision. Then came an unexpected call. George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne wanted to form a supergroup. They wanted Roy Orbison as the 5th member. The Traveling Wilburys, they'd call themselves. Roy was stunned. These were giants of rock and roll, and they wanted him? But Harrison was insistent. Roy was their hero. His voice was irreplaceable. The Wilburys, and beyond recording with the Traveling, Wilburys reminded Roy what he'd forgotten. He belonged among legends because he was one. The chemistry between the 5 musicians was magical. Roy sang on Not Alone Anymore with that old heartbreaking beauty. Simultaneously, Virgin Records signed Roy to record a new solo album. Mystery Girl would be his first major label album in over a decade. Working with T-Bone Burnett, Elvis Costello, and Jeff Lynne, Roy crafted songs that honored his past while sounding contemporary. You Got It, written with Lynn and Petty, became his first top 10 hit in 25 years. The music video showed a smiling Roy, looking healthier and happier than he had in years. At 52, Roy Orbison was experiencing an unprecedented career revival. In October 1988, Roy was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by Bruce Springsteen, who gave an emotional speech about Roy's influence. Standing on that stage, accepting recognition from a new generation, Roy must have felt vindicated. He'd survived loss that would have destroyed most people. He'd endured years of obscurity and dismissal. Now, finally, the world remembered why Roy Orbison mattered. Act. The end. The 6th of December 1988. The final day. On the 6th of December 1988, Roy was at his mother's home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Mystery Girl was complete and set for release in January. The Traveling Wilburys album was a hit. New tours were being planned. After decades of tragedy and decline, Roy Orbison stood on the brink of a triumphant third act. That evening, Roy felt unwell, chest discomfort, difficulty breathing. He'd had heart problems before. His bypass surgery was only a decade past. His years of touring, stress, grief, and health struggles had taken their toll. A massive heart attack struck around 11 p.m. Barbara found him collapsed. Paramedics rushed him to Hendersonville Hospital, but it was too late. Roy Orbison, the lonely voice, was pronounced dead at 11:54 p.m. He was 52 years old. The mystery behind Roy's death was, in medical terms, straightforward. Coronary artery disease, likely exacerbated by years of stress, previous heart surgery, and the toll of constant touring. His 1,978 triple bypass had extended his life, but couldn't erase the underlying damage. Yet there was a cruel irony in the timing. Just when life had finally become beautiful again, career resurgent, family thriving, recognition restored, his heart gave out. Some wondered if the excitement itself was too much. After surviving such profound grief, could Roy's heart handle genuine joy? Doctors would say the heart attack was inevitable, a ticking clock set by years of cardiac disease. But those who loved him wondered if carrying such sorrow for so long had weakened more than just a physical organ. Legacy Mystery Girl was released posthumously in January 1989, reaching number 5 on the Billboard charts, his highest charting album ever. You Got It peaked at number 9. MTV played his videos constantly. A whole new generation discovered that voice. The music industry mourned. Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, and others spoke of Roy's unique genius. At his funeral they played Only the Lonely. Roy Orbison left behind a catalog of timeless songs, a distinctive voice that influenced everyone from Springsteen to Bono, and a story that reads like one of his ballads. Lonely, tragic, beautiful, and ultimately triumphant in its artistic legacy, if not its duration. Epilogue. The true mystery of Roy Orbison isn't how he died. Hearts fail, especially hearts that have been broken and surgically repaired. The mystery is how he survived so long. How does a man bury his wife and 2 children and continue singing songs about loneliness? How does he endure years of obscurity and keep performing? The answer lies in the music itself. Roy Orbison sang because he had no choice. That voice, that impossible, soaring, heartbreaking voice demanded expression. Whether in sold-out arenas or half-empty clubs, whether acclaimed or forgotten, Roy sang. He sang about loneliness because he knew it intimately. He sang about heartbreak because his heart had been shattered repeatedly. He sang about dreams because he understood how fragile and precious they are. Roy Orbison died just as his dreams were coming true again, but perhaps that's fitting. He lived his entire life reaching for something just beyond grasp. his voice stretching toward notes that shouldn't be possible, toward emotions too deep for words. In death, as in life, he remained the lonely voice, forever reaching, forever singing, forever touching something essential and human in everyone who hears him. The dark glasses, the black clothing, the statue still performances, they weren't gimmicks. They were armor for a man whose heart had been broken too many times, who needed distance between himself and the audience because the emotions he channeled were too raw, too real, too painful to share without protection. Roy Orbison's sudden death remains a tragedy, but his life, despite its sorrows, was a triumph. He gave the world a catalogue of perfect songs and showed that vulnerability, not bravado, is true artistic strength. Only the lonely know the way he felt, but through his music we all got a glimpse.